President, and I'm honored to be here today with colleagues who care about something extremely important, which is social workers in the schools. And we all know that there's a mental health crisis. We know that support must start early, it must be accessible, and must be culturally appropriate. We know that the executive budget underfunds school-based social workers, including the students who live in temporary housing. I think this has become a budget dance, not the fault of the City Council. I know that last year the New York Times reported that 1 in every 10 students in New York City is in a temporary situation. And I know that the percentage of students facing economic hardship is over 70%. 82% of students who were surveyed in 2017 said that they were harassed or bullied in some manner, and that's 17% than in 2012. All I can say over and over again is culturally appropriate mental health services correlate with better educational outcomes, reduced suspensions, reduced absenteeism, and improvements in school climate. Those of us who've had young people in our homes know this. In February, I wrote to Chancellor Carranza that the Department of Education should be investing in research-based solutions, and mental health services and social workers are his answer. I said that this budget should fund the ratio of social workers recommended by NASW, National Association Social Workers. The ratio should be 1 social worker for every 250 students, and 1 social worker for every 50 students for those who are more vulnerable. This is not too much, and that's why I'm standing here calling on Mayor de Blasio and the City Council budget negotiators to find money for 1 social worker in every school. I want to thank the Independent Budget Office, initials IBO, because they studied how much it would cost to put 1 social worker in every school. IBO found that it would cost $94.4 million to have 1 in each of the 716 public schools that do not have a social worker. Schools do have social workers. In Manhattan, 147 of our district schools and D75 schools from K to 12, they need at least 1 social worker. I must admit, I don't care where the money comes from, whether it's from Thrive or from the Department of Education or elsewhere. But the mayor's office says that staff are available in schools to support students. But those staff members have to be social workers because the amazing work that the guidance counselors do, they are swamped and they cannot also be social workers. So, mental health consultants assigned to 10 schools and no students, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a person who was there full time. So, you have to have a plan. I certainly want to thank a person who has a plan, and that is the chair of the Education Committee of the New York City Council. So I sat in hearings that he has had on this topic. Obviously, he's a former teacher. He understands this. I have also seen, and I'm probably not to say this, but in a budget discussion with the mayor and the city council, this council member and other council members said to the mayor, we want social workers in the schools. I've had a lot of foster care kids. Absolutely needed to have social workers in the school. So without further ado, I want to thank everybody for being here, but call on Councilmember Mark Traeger, Chair of the Education Committee and a rock star. Please come forward.
How do you follow Borough President Gail Brewer?
Very well. You're doing
No. She is one of the most substantive, coolest borough presidents ever. So let's give it up for Borough President Gail Brewer for her excellent leadership and work. So the borough president laid out the hard facts. I just want to give some true stories that happened in my district that really just exemplifies the gravity of this issue. I had a 7-year-old in my district in elementary school whose IEP assigned paraprofessional was absent. And the DOE did not provide a substitute para for him on that day. And so the 7-year-old was having a bad day. The school lacks a full-time social worker. What did the school do? They called 911 and had the police respond to a 7-year-old having a bad day. Folks, A 7-year-old having a bad day is not an NYPD issue. What we needed in that situation was a full-time social worker and someone that could provide support in the school. Second example, I have a great principal in my district, in a high school, that was told if you want to contact Thrive Services for support for students, you have to contact your borough support office. So she did. She said, I have a student who needs help and services, a vulnerable, marginalized student going through a tough time. What did the person say to her? Well, technically, I can't provide services, but I can connect you to an organization that might do a workshop for you with some PowerPoints and some great handouts, and we could do it maybe in a couple of months. Our children are not in need of consultants. They are not in need of, I'm not even sure what they call them these days, community mental health consultants from Thrive. They need direct services in our schools.
Yay!
We need social workers.
Yay!
We need counselors. We need more school psychologists. I want to say we have over 200,000 kids with IEPs in our school system, and many more are on wait lists, and there's cases backlogged because of a lack of school psychologists that are supposed to be a part of the IEP process. So this is a major priority for us here in the City Council. The Borough President's right. I told the Mayor this directly. The city now actually spends over $400 million on NYPD in our schools. And there are more NYPD agents than social workers, counselors, and school psychologists combined. That is an indictment against our school system. That is what is promoting that school to prison pipeline. So many of the issues can be mitigated if we hired substantially more social workers. And so in this budget process, I could tell you this right now, that's why I just left the room, because I want to highlight my support for the Borough President and this great initiative. We have drawn the line that number one, the DOE must lift the freeze on hiring social workers and guidance counselors, because that's number one. And number two, let us fund a substantial amount of licensed, credentialed social workers, counselors, school psychologists to better meet the needs of our students. And folks, we will not advance a budget if we don't see that happen. In solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Burke. She's the rock star.
The social worker at International High School at Union Square, Hillary Copel, please come forward. You are fabulous. Hillary, come on.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to the Borough President. She's been such a supporter for us. My name's Hillary. I've been a school social worker in middle and high schools for the last 14 years. Why are social workers needed in schools? What do we provide that is unique or critical to students, families, and school communities? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, approximately 1 in 5 youth aged 13 to 18 experience a severe mental disorder at some point during their life. Schools are often the first place where these issues are recognized or addressed. The 2017 report from the New York State Council of Superintendents indicates 45% of the superintendents cited the most widely significant problem as the capacity to help students in meeting non-academic needs, including, for example, health and mental health issues. This is where social workers come in. Social workers help students to be able to be present as students. What does that mean? First, we develop trusting relationships with students. Statistics show students who can identify at least one caring adult in their schools have better outcomes. I have the same exact statistic as President Brewer. 1 to 50 is the appropriate ratio for students with more intensive needs. At this time in New York City, not every school has even one social worker, and the ratio is closer to 1 to 900 citywide. Second, social workers help create a positive and supportive school culture that encourages increased attendance and feelings of safety and belonging. This web of relationships acts as a prevention strategy to reduce conflicts, suspensions, and dropouts. Students know who to go to if they feel sad or angry, have been triggered, or sense problems. Social workers are trained to de-escalate crises, provide counseling so students can get back in the classroom. We are the point people who address self-harm, suicidal ideation, child abuse, mental illness, and more. Third, Social workers are service providers. In our schools, we survey our entire student body to learn more about their background, interests, and needs. 35% of our students are in temporary housing, and 80% of them receive needed items they needed to attend and participate in school, such as a winter coat or clothes for PE class. Our social workers assisted 30% of our students to get glasses, providing services on-site or accompanying them personally. Our team links students with health insurance, legal consultations, jobs, after-school programs, and anything else they may need. At many schools, students may speak upwards of 25 different languages and are new to the country. Undergraduate and graduate social work interns that speak the languages and know the cultures of the students are indispensable to build bridges to those students who otherwise might be lost. In order to learn, students cannot be distracted by medical issues, safety concerns, trauma, housing instability, or financial insecurity, for example. Social workers build relationships, create individualized interventions, and support students in their path forward in education and life. We need to be in the schools full-time to develop authentic and consistent relationships and intervene with students in their natural environment. We need to be part of the school staff to collaborate with teachers and administrators to support them to best serve the students. We need DOE social workers in every school to help shape school culture. Support for DOE social workers is something that cannot be sacrificed if we want our students to identify and thrive as students. Our work cannot be done by school counselors, teachers, administrators, or outside agencies. And finally, school social workers are also trained in advocacy and are registering our 16 and up students to vote and engage their civic rights and responsibilities. Thank you for your time.
Hillary, thank you.
welcome.
That's just phenomenal. Okay. Next, we're going to hear quickly from Mark Levine, City Council member.
All right, thank you. Thank you, social workers, for devoting your career to this incredibly important profession, whether you're in the schools or settlement houses. And thank you to the NASW for leading the charge on this. I began my career many years ago as a teacher at a junior high school 149 in District 7 in the South Bronx. 800 students, zero, count them, zero social workers on staff. This had a devastating impact on young people. The truth is, there's no academic success if we ignore the social and emotional needs of children. That is doubly true for kids coming from low-income communities that face severe challenges throughout life. We cannot ignore the social and emotional needs of kids, or we are doomed to fail in the schools. So this investment in a social worker for every school, and I'm going to use the word investment, it's not an expense. It is an investment in the lives of kids that will pay off in every way in their development into healthy adults, into their academic success. It is crazy that we are not already making this investment because of its very clear returns for our city. And I want you guys to know, I know you heard from the chair of our education committee and others, that this is a major priority for the city council in our negotiations, a major priority. This is on top of mind for all of us. Myself as a member of the education committee, also co-chair of the Manhattan delegation, you can bet that I'm pushing for this, as are my colleagues. You have very, very deep support, and nothing's over till it's over, but I am optimistic we're going to get a great win for our students and for social workers in New York City schools. So let's keep fighting until we win this. Thank you, Gail Brewer, for leading the charge. Thank you, social workers, for what you do for our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Henry Rubio, Executive Vice President of the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, CSA. More importantly, former principal at Philip Randolph High School. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you for
very
inviting me. As Gail said, I'm here as the Executive Vice President of the Council for School Administrators. And while we don't, as a union, represent social workers, our members work closely and value the work that our social workers do day in and day out. We strongly believe, as a former assistant principal in the Bronx, in a school where we didn't have a single social worker, I dealt with those concerns every single day with our students. As a high school principal of almost 2,000 kids here in Manhattan, we had a part-time social worker. Students, I can tell you, principals across the city don't believe that students are in crisis part-time, and they can't be served by a part-time social worker. Students that are in crisis need full-time social workers and full-time support. So we're here at CSA standing with our colleagues and our Borough President, Gail Brewer, to say that this is the time and New York City is the place. Thank you for an opportunity to speak, and we look forward to continue to support you, Gail.
Right.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. Dr. Claire Greenford, Executive Director, New York City Chapter, what I call NASW, because I used to work for Ruth Messenger, and she's a social worker, NASW, National Association of Social Workers.
Having us. Thank you. Good afternoon. So I am Dr. Claire Greenford, and I am the Executive Director for the National Association of Social Workers New York City Chapter. We represent over 6,000 members in New York City, so over 6,000 voters in New York City. And this is a critical conversation, but we need to move beyond critical conversation and towards critical action. We are especially honored to be here today, and we really want to thank you and salute you, honestly. Honestly. You are very well known in the social work sphere for your unwavering commitment and your dedication to equity, as well as to ensuring that our children are going to survive. I don't need to quote or re-quote the stats that have already been given. However, on average, there is one social worker, if at all, for 800 students. A 7-hour workday has 420 minutes. If you divide that by the amount of students, that is less than 5 seconds each social worker has to see a student. It takes 5 seconds to say hello, good morning, how are you? That is it. We will not find out what is going on with the student if all we can say is hello, good morning, how are you? What's at stake? As social workers, we are keenly aware that many of the issues that we are seeing in our schools are a direct response to the psychosocial needs that are unaddressed by our students. We know that it's because of the structural inequalities that exist in our systems, including our schools. We know that they are facing mounting psychosocial pressures, including bullying, including homelessness, including violence in their homes, including or underemployed parents, including not having continuing resources and access to quality health care. And social workers are on the front line of healthcare. Social workers address all of these needs because at the core of who we are is an integrative and holistic approach to addressing psychosocial needs. Social workers have a unique role in understanding the psychosocial dynamics that make up an individual, a family, and a community. The lens that social workers have allows us to find the unique issues that are truly underlining what we are seeing. This includes providing psychosocial needs and addressing issues such as eating disorders, substance misuse, and behavioral problems that may otherwise be miscategorized. We are also really excited because this work that our borough president is doing dovetails with our advocacy efforts on the state level. Specifically speaking, a bill to ensure that there is a social worker in every district in New York State, because they are severely under-resourced districts. They are districts that have no social worker within miles. And if they do, they may have one social worker covering over 1,500 students. Social workers, like myself, understand the importance of intentionally weaving the culture of mental health into all aspects of our school, not just with our teachers, but for our students, for our parents, for our custodial staff, for those who are serving food in the cafeterias. Everyone must understand and be part of this. We must be both trauma and healing informed to move forward. We also stress the importance that while we fight around budgetary needs, every student does not need one-on-one, but we should take a lesson from positive youth development and understand that one adult, particularly a licensed and trained professional, a licensed, trained social worker like myself, a clinical social worker who can treat, diagnose, and assess is necessary. Many of our children are living in communities where they do not have access. As the executive director for New York City, I often hear from colleagues, young social workers who are in schools who tell me that they're ready to leave after a few months because they're overwhelmed and they don't have the support that they need. To that end, we also say that social workers need adequate support and reporting structures within the schools to know who they can go to and how they can get effective and timely response for their needs. They also need to have access to clinical supervisors so that they can be supervised as well. Burnout is real, and if the person who is helping is not supported, it makes it impossible to help. And if you will allow me one more minute to give you a real example of a story, please do. High school student who by all accounts flew under the radar. High honor roll, 98% average, no behavioral issues, teacher's pet. Had friends and made friends with everyone. What was unseen by everyone except the school social worker was that this stellar student was in significant emotional pain, struggling to fit into American culture as an immigrant, dealing with loss, adversity, grief, confusion, depression, eating disorder, and frequent thoughts of suicide. That social worker used their skill sets to see beyond the unseen, to see that person. Never pushy, all the while doing clinical assessments that student never understood. That social worker understood that the good grades and good behavior was an ego defense called sublimation, which means that that the student was able to show that they were doing well when they weren't, because they were able to focus on their grades to hide their pain. This issue is personal, it is professional, and it matters to the countless children I have served and the countless children I have treated. And I know the details intimately of this case because I am that student. If it were not for my school social worker and the love and care of an art teacher, I may not be here today. Beyond the hand that God has on my life, the ability of social workers to see, and I mean truly see what is going on, is the reason why I am standing before you today, why you can hear my voice. Because there were many times as a child that I did not think I was going to make it to the next day. And my social worker in my school saw me, not the behavior, she saw me. I also know that 1 in 716 is not even close to enough. Access and equity saves lives. If a school social worker can turn a depressed child with great grades, but nonetheless depressed and suicidal, into the woman you see before you with 2 bachelor's, 1 master's, and a doctoral degree, what can that social worker do for you? What can that social worker do for your family and for our children? I know that my life was made better because of access to having a social worker who had time to see me. And I know that that's what we need to do for every child. They deserve it, and their lives are depending on us to make this about human rights and not about money. This is about access to quality care. This is a basic human right. And we thank you, as the National Association of Social Workers, for the opportunity to advocate for our children, and we thank you for your unwavering commitment to do so.
Thank you. NASW is in good hands. Thank you very much. Susan Stamler, Executive Director, United Neighborhood Houses. Where's Susan?
Sorry,
Oh,
I'm
no,
standing
you're great.
in
Oh, go,
for
good.
Susan.
Go ahead, Greg.
Hi, I'm Gregory Brender from United Neighborhood Houses. We are a policy and social change organization made up of New York City settlement houses. And what settlement house youth workers and child care workers see every day is the importance of social emotional development. They know that growth doesn't just take place in the classroom, that it requires support from caring adults and from caring and trained adults. And that's why we're so proud to stand with Borough President Brewer and other elected officials to support this important investment in social workers, so that we know that young people in school, that young people in shelters, that children everywhere have the social and emotional support they need to truly grow, to truly succeed. Thank you for leading this.
And now I'm going to call on Alan Van Capel, who is the Executive Director of the Educational Alliance, and whom I call on for everything.
And when Gail asks, you just say yes. First of all, this is a big time issue. The system is in crisis. And when you have a big issue like this, it's important to have a team leader, and this is in very good hands with President Gail Brewer. I also want to say it's such an honor to be standing alongside social workers and the NASW. You're not paid enough. There aren't nearly enough of you. Most people think that social workers are an add-on and an extra, but they don't actually realize that it's like flying an airplane in our schools. Would any one of us go on an airplane if one of the engines were broken or missing? We wouldn't. And that's what's happening right now in our schools. It's an airplane, and one engine is working, kind of, the academic piece, and one is totally broken and busted. We wouldn't get on that airplane, and it's a crisis in our schools. You know, we've been around for 130 years at Educational Alliance. And 130 years ago, you could create a program, one program, an intervention, and help somebody in crisis. Human needs haven't changed in 130 years, but how complex they are has changed. You can't have a single intervention. You need a holistic approach, and in order to get to that approach, you need a social worker. This isn't rocket science. We know what works. So if you know what works, fund it and get them in the schools. And here's why it matters. Because a precious child who is in our school, many of them are suffering by no fault of their own. 50% of the kids at PS 188 on the Lower East Side where I live in transitional housing. Not their fault. More kids today than there were 5 years ago being bullied in their schools. Not their fault. Drug use in the East Village up, not down. Kids going to school with that, not their fault. And all of the other stressors in their life, somebody needs to see and address that, and that's the role of the social worker. Not the teacher, the social worker. And that's why we're proud to stand with NASW, with Gail Brewer. We're proud to stand, and I'm representing our social workers at Educational Alliance who do harder work than almost anybody can possibly imagine, and we're gonna get this done. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Alice Bufkin, Director of Policy for Child and Adolescent Health at Citizens Committee for Children. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I really want to thank Borough President Brewer for holding today's press conference and for your ongoing commitment to this work around increasing social workers and mental health supports for New York City students. I'm going to say what everyone here knows. It is not right that more than 700 schools in New York City don't have a social worker. It's not right that a single social worker is responsible for the social and emotional needs of 800 students. It's not right that too many schools in New York City respond to a child's social or emotional need by suspensions, expulsions, or calling EMS or the NYPD. Our children deserve better. They need better. Parents should know that when they send their child to school, they are getting the social, emotional support they need to succeed in the classroom and outside the classroom. But unfortunately, we don't have enough resources very clearly in our city right now. So we know that we can start addressing this by increasing the number of Bridging the Gap social workers, by ensuring that every student in temporary housing has access to a social worker, that every student in a high-needs school has access to a social worker, and ultimately that every student in a New York City public school has access to social worker supports. So we join Borough President Brewer in urging the City Council and the Mayor to make sure that our budget addresses these urgent needs for students in our schools. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions from the press? Yes, go ahead.
The social workers advocates are also calling for the addition of more Title IX coordinators at the DOE.
Yes.
There's only one right now.
Yes.
I mean, how do you feel those two issues are intertwined?
Well, certainly Title IX is one of those wonderful titles that said there should be equal funding for girls, underserved, etc. It's been around for a long time. I have been saying actually you only can take on so many issues at the same time. But I've been talking about Title IX for like, I don't know, 10 years, maybe more. It's not only underfunded, it's a law, and the law is not being followed. So that's a really, even a more egregious issues in some cases. So Title IX is not being, the law is not being followed.
So with all of these issues at the end of the budget, social workers, Title IX, equal pay for early childhood educators,
Yes.
Are you confident that all of this can get done?
Well, certainly yesterday, and I know that the wonderful moderator, Alan Van Gabelli, of yesterday's press conference to talk about that issue. I know that the budget negotiation team of the City Council, I know for a fact that the issue of parity, you can talk about that, and the issue of social workers is high on their agenda. So I think our discussion today is very timely, but if you want to talk about parity, Alan, feel free. I mean, I was there yesterday also.
Yeah, no, I think we've been convinced that there's a scarcity of resources in the city. It's $140 million to close the gap on the issue of parity. It's a finite amount of money, a small amount of money to bring the social workers to the schools that we have. And meanwhile, we funded a program with $900 million that doesn't end up in the management report. and that isn't adequately serving the families. There are funds for this. There's $900 million that was gone to Thrive New York, Thrive NYC. Clearly, some piece of that can be better directed to make sure that social workers are in every single school. Then we have an actual proof that that money is really serving the people that they're intended to serve. And if the city can't find $140 billion, I'm happy to go inside that building, as is anybody, $140 million, and we can certainly find $140 million for pay parity.
Any other? Thank you for being here. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I know it looks like a small group, but I can tell you what is good is that we've been doing this for a while thanks to everybody here, and the fact is the City Council is making this a priority thanks to your advocacy. And also, if I don't thank the Daily News yesterday, I assume you saw the great article yesterday, and that helped. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.